Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dan Hartledge, and I serve as president of the Louisville Forum. We typically meet on the second Wednesday of every month at Vincenzo's Restaurant in downtown Louisville, but these days we're meeting virtually. The meeting is occurring by way of Zoom and is also being live streamed on the Louisville Forum Facebook page. The Louisville Forum is a nonpartisan public issues group founded in 1984. The forum hosts debates and discussions of contemporary and sometimes controversial public policy issues that affect the greater Louisville community. Although we may take up issues that have a national interest at times, we try to highlight the local perspective. And the Louisville Forum never takes a position on an issue. For more information on the Louisville Forum, our programs, or to make reservations, please visit our website at louisvilleforum.org. Our topic today is Kentucky's 2020 election plan. How well will it work? For Kentuckians and most other voting Americans, voting in the 2020 general election will be different than past elections. The changes largely stem from the pandemic and the prospect of large numbers of Kentuckians, both voters and poll workers, assembling on a single day at what is typically about 3,700 polling places throughout the state. So to reduce risks related to such gatherings, Kentucky leaders moved to significantly reduce the number of polling places while also opening some polling places early. Some polls opened, in fact, yesterday around the state. Absentee voting has also been encouraged and is made easier now. The deadline to request an absentee ballot was this past Friday, and nearly 20% of Kentucky's registered voters filed requests. And so many more ballots will be mailed this year than past years. Creating the 2020 election plan has been controversial. At one point, the plan called for just 4 polling locations in all of Jefferson County. That was then raised to 8. Many in the community said that was not enough. State Representative Jason Nemes, one of our panelists, was among a bipartisan group of state and local lawmakers who pushed for more voting locations in Jefferson County. And in fact, Representative Nemes, prior to the June primary, filed a class action suit with a group of Kentucky voters demanding that the state's more populous counties have more than one voting location during the primaries, which was at one time the plan for some of the more populous counties. But ultimately, for this general election, it was decided we will have 20 voting locations in Jefferson County on election day, with 4 of them opening early, beginning yesterday, in fact, those 4 opened. The process and challenges I just described regarding Jefferson County have also played out to varying degrees in most counties around the state. So we have 3 panelists today who will discuss the election plan. They'll discuss how will it work and discuss how well they think it will work. Nore Ghibaudy has been the Director of Communications, Media, and Public Relations for the Jefferson County Clerk's Office since 2007. When joining Bobby Hosklaw's staff, he also acquired the responsibilities of spokesperson for the Jefferson County Board of Elections. Nore's first day, as he likes to remember, with Bobby Hosklaw's staff was actually primary election day, 2007. Frances Wagner is the president of the League of Women Voters of Kentucky, a nonpartisan organization that promotes the informed and active participation of citizens in government through study and through action. Fran has a bachelor's degree in politics from Catholic University of America and a master's in history from the University of Louisville. Jason Nemes represents the 33rd District in the Kentucky House of Representatives. He serves on the Election and Constitutional Amendment Committee in the House, and also is an attorney who has, among other things, practiced in the area of election law. So, Nore, we'll start with you. And what we can do here is I'll ask you the question that is essentially the title of the program regarding Kentucky's 2020 election plan. Nore, how well do you think this plan will work?
Well, I'll tell you this, is a lot of planning went into this once we were provided the guidelines from the State Board of Elections. I think there's been a misunderstanding all the way along that there would only be 4 locations or 8. That was never the plan. When we sat down, the Jefferson County staff from the election center and members of the board and their input, it was looking at a large number at that time. We were kind of pushed into announcing what we had at that point. And I know that Bobby did hold a press conference to announce 3, possibly 4. We were still doing site inspections at that time. As a matter of fact, one of the locations that we looked at very seriously is not one of the first 4 for early voting that we started yesterday. But narrowing that down, you also have to look at all the other components of that, whether that's the mail-in absentee voting ballot, the locations that we're choosing for early voting, and then after the ones we are adding on for all the safety requirements from the CDC, the state, the facilities themselves, whether it be parking, whatever those things may be. But I think that the overall plan that we submitted was submitted about a week prior to the deadline, which was the 25th of September, and it was approved on October 9th. Of course, we did open yesterday with the 4 locations, and we did close the portal for Jefferson County on Friday with 175,000 or just under ballot requests. And at this point, I think we, as of this morning at 6 a.m., had only about 15,000 left to get out. And we've already received almost 40,000 back.
All right. Thank you, Nore. And Fran, we'll come to you next and ask you the same question from your perspective. Just share your thoughts on what this election plan, how it's all going to play out.
Thanks, Dan. You know, it's such an important topic that I decided to participate in this panel today that includes a candidate for office this November, Representative Nemes, while not inviting his opponent. So let me be clear, the League of Women Voters is nonpartisan, as you mentioned in the introduction. We do not endorse or oppose candidates for political office. Were the League to have hosted this forum, we would not have included a candidate without also inviting the opposing candidate. But we're not the host. And I'm here to talk about what all of us can do to encourage everyone who's registered to vote during this election season and ensure that the process is accessible, fair, and transparent so that citizens have confidence in the election results. You know, the League's 100 years old this year. We grew out of a 70-year plus struggle to give women the right to vote with the passage of the 19th Amendment. And unfortunately, that fight has had to continue so that all men and women of whatever color or economic class can vote. And because the right to vote grounds all other rights, empowering citizens to become participants in our democracy rather than mere petitioners. Nothing speaks more to citizenship than the right to vote. For this reason, the League was very pleased when our Secretary of State, the Governor, and the State Board of Elections came to an agreement that gives voters for this election more choice and flexibility than ever before. Just as examples, there are additional days to cast votes early. Mail-in absentee ballots were allowed up until, of course, closing of the request time. But for anybody afraid of contracting coronavirus or spreading it, and the voting super centers, 20 will be in Jefferson County. So now it's up to each one of us to vote and encourage everyone else to. And as we head into these last few weeks, the League will be continuing to work hard to provide nonpartisan voter information about candidates, issues, and voting rules. And finally, I suggest anyone with questions go to vote411.org That's the League of Women Voters website for election information. So thank you, the Louisville Forum, for putting this on this important question, and I look forward to questions.
Okay, thanks, Fran. And Representative Nemes, the floor is yours. How, from your perspective, what's your assessment of the Kentucky's 2020 election plan?
I think it's going well. I think it will go well. It was fits and starts and lawsuits to get here, but I want to commend, first of all, off the top, Governor Andy Beshear and Secretary of State Mike Adams and our own county clerk Bobby Hosklaw and the local board of elections. They've had a Herculean task here. We're in the midst of a pandemic. We're having an unprecedented election, even without the pandemic. You put the pandemic on top of that, it's just very difficult. And I'm happy that the local board of elections and our county clerk and our state officials have come together, and they've come up with what I think is a pretty good plan. I wish it were a lot more locations, especially in early voting. I've already got some early reports of people long lines and people being frustrated, but that's going to come in any election, whether it's at the precinct level. So I think it will go well. We've been in a very tough time this year, but the silver lining, if you can look for a silver lining, and I think this is a true silver lining, is the way we're going to vote this election and the way we just voted in the primary. And I'm hoping that we can take this experience and change the law, because this is only for this election. The General Assembly is going to have to act to make this or portions of this permanent. And so I'm hoping that we're able to do that. During the session, I worked with Secretary of State Michael Adams to file House Bill 596. And that would have expanded absentee ballots, made it easier to register to vote before an election, created voting super centers like we're seeing now, expanded the hours of voting, and made the administration much simpler in attracting precinct officers and those kinds of things. We wanted to go further than we did in House Bill 596 this past year, which was worked on and filed before the pandemic. Had a chance, but then the pandemic shut it down. But we wanted to go as far as we could to get something passed. Even though we wanted to go further, we felt restricted. I'm hoping that because of our experience in the primary and our experience in what we're undergoing right now in the general election, that we'll be able to go further and do more than we thought we were able to do before, because it's no longer this big scary thing that may or may not happen. We will have already done it, and I think come through it largely better. And so we got a lot more to talk about, but I think this is a good plan. I think it enables people to vote. It's geographically dispersed all throughout the county, which was a major concern, and the biggest concern we had in the primary. What we found in the primary is that more people voted, and that was good. But what we also found in the primary was that minority precincts, their increase of rate of voting was less than non-minority precincts. So it did have a suppressive effect, having one location. So the fact that we have 20 on the general election is a good thing, and I'm glad that Bobby Hosklaw and the local board of elections were able to get that done.
Iris, I'll toss to you. You get us started with a question or two.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks to our panel. Still receiving some questions. Continue to encourage you all to utilize the chat box located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Let's begin with sort of an open question that all three panelists can address. And Representative Nemes, you touched on it. After COVID, what are some strong takeaways or some tactics that the State Board of Elections or here locally should administer moving forward, ranging from more access through absentee, some of the satellite voting locations? What are some things that should be deployed moving forward when conducting our elections? And I'll start with Fran. Any thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Iris. Yes, it would be the League's hope that that many of the provisions that we are allowing for this election because of COVID would be, as Representative Nemes said, enacted in the next session of the legislature to be the case, is standard case. We get a lot of calls at the League, for example, in past elections, of people who work 12-hour shifts. And, if you only have an election going from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. on one day, you disenfranchise a lot of people. There are people with young children who have to get them to daycare before and after, and on and on and on. So it is a disgrace that we have so few people who actually participate in voting. You know, often the winner of an election in Kentucky, maybe only 20% of eligible voters voted for that person, but so few turn out. So we really have system changes that need to occur so that more people can participate in our democracy.
Thank you, Fran. I'll kick it over to Nore. Any thoughts of some long-standing changes that we could experience here in Jefferson County moving forward?
Well, I think that there's not one Jefferson County resident that would like, of course, the elections to be back in their own neighborhood. I know we did here as well. The primary was overwhelming and with changes in a very short period of time. And of course, going into the fall, after closing that down in mid-July, we were right back at it. I think so many people in Jefferson County don't realize there are only 30 employees at the election center. And they have been, the rest of the clerk employees have been working 4-hour shifts through the week and 12-hour shifts on Saturday and Sunday to try to just complete the ballots that we're sending out. I calculated yesterday that it takes about 25 minutes for each ballot that is received, that is requested from the clerk's office, from the beginning of getting it, receiving it, opening it, and then after scanning the votes. You think about 25 minutes times 175,000. That's a lot of time and a lot of people manpower. As we look at this, of course, with COVID-19, there were many changes and more changes this fall. We've met them all in the challenges. And I think that, you know, just even finding the locations, things like that were difficult at the beginning because we wanted to make sure it was for the safety of the voters as well as the election officers. It's yesterday I actually walked the lines at the Louisville Marriott East in the morning. People had started lining up at 7 o'clock in the morning. They were enthusiastic about voting and they knew that it didn't open until 8:30. And I walked and talked to the people and they said they wanted to be one of the first people. They wanted to vote on the first day. And I understand that that also happened at the other 3 locations. We had a good turnout for the first day at all of the locations. And in looking at what will happen, you know, in the spring, like I said, we'd love to go back to the neighborhoods. And the vote centers have been interesting. There's no doubt about it. It's a lot of manpower, not only, especially with the COVID, because we have employed people to help clean after everybody votes, sanitize things, a lot more equipment, things that are necessary, but it's still been accomplished. We have between 115 and 125 people at those voting locations every day. That's a lot of election officers just out there. But one of the things that I'm so proud of is our election officers. We normally have about 2,400 of them. Many of them wanted to still serve as an election officer. So as we went through with the additions of the people who called in, we started at the beginning of our normal 2,400 because some have been doing for 20 and 30 years and they wanted to be there again. And that we really appreciate is their service. But there are so many things I think that we'll just adjust as time comes along. But I don't think, I'm a little worried that sometimes that we may not go back to the way it always was.
And for you, Representative Nemes, you know, what's achievable in the next couple legislative sessions, knowing that, you know, future budget cycles, you know, what could change in the near future relating to how Kentucky conducts elections?
Yeah, so let me answer the question directly, and then I'll put some what I think will be barriers in the way of getting to where I hope we can go. You know, I think we need precinct officer reform. You have to work 12-hour days if you're a precinct officer. A number of our precinct officers, the majority of them are older than the average population. And so they, you know, it's hard to work 12 hours for anybody. And so maybe allow shifts of 6 hours. If you want to work the full time, great. But I think the clerks might be able to recruit more people if they could have a 6-hour shifts rather than require the full 12-hour shift. Now I want to expand the hours on election day, which would necessitate, I think, more shifts. I'd like to go to 14 hours rather than just 12, which I guess is a second change. But not only the hours, I think we need to expand the days. Having an election on just a Tuesday in November is good. It's what we've had for a long time, but I think we can do better and have at the very least a Saturday and maybe a week in advance at the very least to have more election days that people can come and vote. I like the super centers. I completely understand the difficulty that presents to the county clerks. And so what I think maybe we can kick off with in the General Assembly is to go back generally to the neighborhood model, but then also have a couple super centers throughout the county. So if I'm working downtown and I live in the South End and I might not be able to get back, then I can go to the super center at the clerk's office or downtown or wherever. So have a couple of super centers as well as the neighborhood options. I think that's something that I'd like to see to give more opportunity for people to vote. There's a number of other things that I'd like to continue over. The mail-in ballot is something that we've found works. I think there's protections in place. In Kentucky, when you vote, it's put in the computer immediately. So if you try to vote again, you'll get caught and hopefully prosecuted. And I know that Secretary Adams has said he will turn over anybody that's caught trying to do that over to prosecution. And if it's a mistake, then we understand. If it's not, then you should go to jail for trying to have elections fraud. I think two real barriers to put in place or that are in front of us are cost. Not only cost at the administration of the election level, there's no doubt about that. I know that the Secretary of State and county clerks have talked a lot about that. Thankfully, there's some grant money nationally and to help with that, alleviate those costs, but also costs on the part of the candidates. If you're running for president or Senate, it's one thing, but if you're running for judge or local magistrate or county or House of Representatives or state Senate, your dollars are scarce. And so you now have to run under this election, you now have to run a 2-month campaign rather than try to reach a crescendo on election day. You have to have it solid, and that costs a lot more money. And I don't think any of us want more money in politics, especially local politics. So that's a real concern. We also have the concern of fraud. I think it's not pervasive. I know it's not pervasive. I'm convinced it's not pervasive, but it does exist. I've represented people who went to prison for vote fraud, for buying votes, for vote fraud, for stealing elections. I've represented boards of elections and have been and know that dead people have voted in Kentucky and know that people voted on their behalf, obviously. So fraud does exist. However, I want to make sure that people understand it's not pervasive. And so the system that we have now, especially with the electronics helping us, I think we can control that kind of thing. But those, I think, are the two barriers that people are going to bring up, and that is the cost and the fraud. I think there's a response to both of those, but those are real concerns that people have as we go forward and try to improve our election system, learning from the COVID primary and general election.
Very good. Nore, anything to add? Fran, anything to add from that?
Well, one thing that I would add on the absentee ballots, that one of the advantages if we expand absentee balloting is that it gives people a chance to look at the whole ballot and make decisions about perhaps things like constitutional amendments and down ballot races. I think many voters end up in when they go to vote in person, they've thought of their vote for the top of the ticket, but really haven't given much consideration to some of the other questions on the ballot. And when you get the absentee ballot, when you get the ballot in the mail, you have time to think, well, I didn't even know that was a question, or I don't know anything about those candidates, and you have time to do some research on it. So I think there's a lot of reasons. I like a lot of Representative Nemes's ideas, but I think on expanding and being able to use expanded absentee voting is a really good idea. And I would like to reiterate the fact that there are no studies that show us that there is significant voter fraud with absentee voting or mail-in voting. It's just not there. And if it's set up right and you have the checks that we would all want to see in place, it can be done safely and should be done.
And Dan, if I might real quickly, I think that's a tremendously important point that Fran just made about giving the voter the time to I mean, we all want to think that everybody knows what they're voting on and they've researched everything and they went to League of Women Voters website and they went to the Constitution. Most of us don't do that. So what I'm getting is scores of people. It's taking a lot of my time, but I'm getting scores of people who are contacting me saying, oh, what is Amendment 1? What is Amendment 2? And so what I've done is, trying to be as unbiased as possible, is I've posted and I've sent a lot of people, here's the pros and cons of 1 and here's the pros and cons of 2. But that's a tremendously important point that Fran has made right there. It allows our people to have the opportunity to educate themselves and make a better judgment for how they're going to vote on the government that's going to govern them.
Fran, I'll tell you I can't begin to say how much we appreciate you informing voters out there of some of the things that we do offer here at the clerk's office. One of them is every resident has that opportunity to go in and get a sample ballot, both the front and the back, prior to the election. As a matter of fact, that's how I vote. I actually go in, I print out the ballot, I'll do research on some of the candidates I may not know, especially the judges. I take a good consideration of them, and review the amendments on the back. And then after that way, when I go in, I can make a good solid judgment of, I know that many voters, I saw them carrying in their sample ballot where they've done just that for the voting for the election yesterday. In looking at the future, I think that's probably the best way to go for so many people, is to see it ahead of time. If they choose to not trust the mail system for whatever reason, not trust a drop box or them even receiving a ballot, but they definitely want to go and vote. And I heard a lot of that in the last week or so. And so one of the best ways is to get that ballot ahead of time by securing it offline.
Good stuff, guys. Thank you. I've got a couple of, I have a text message here that it's a good question. I'll read it as it's written. It's a little long, but I'd be interested in your all's reply. Is it true that you had to print, let's see here we go. Is it true you had to print separate ballots for residents for all small cities and make them available at all polling places? Similarly, must you print separate ballots for each Metro Council race and provide them in all polling locations, including ones far from those respective districts? If so, couldn't voters be required to vote at 1 or 2 locations to save money, hassle, and paper?
Well, there is no doubt that a lot of money has been spent on this general election with the ballots accordingly. There are 1,520 ballot styles in Jefferson County for the general election. There was about 2,500 for the primary. We actually have 1,520 ballots laid out at each one of these 4 super centers, so that anybody can go anywhere, walk up and get their ballot. It's not like some of the small counties that may have 1 or 2, and that's it. It's a big difference when you're looking at a county this size, and the cost to put 100% of the ballots down so that anybody can walk anywhere. You can't be moving ballots around. Once the ballots are in those facilities, there you have security with them 24/7 all the way until the end of the election on election day. That's just a lot of cost and security, not alone the printing of those ballots. We have that at those 4 right now. We're getting ready to add 16 more sets of that. That's a lot of money, plus all the ones that we have sent out through the mail. You just can't judge where they'll vote in what part of the city, and therefore you've got to make them available. You can't be moving around on election day. That's just not a safe thing to do.
Very good. One other question I've received just now, and Nora, you kind of touched on it, but let's go a little further on it. How much extra is this election process costing the county, and how are we paying for it?
There is some money that comes to the state, but we are paying for it definitely here in Jefferson County. The elections themselves are paid through the mayor's office, but not for the employees, the time, and many of the extra things that we do need. Of course, we do not have National Guard helping at this time. They will be helping only on election day, and that will be 2 people at each one of those 20 locations. Right now, we are paying people to election officers, because of the security of it, to cleanse the voting areas, to wipe down the screens, to cleanse the tables. Of course, every voter that comes in, they're given a pin, they can take it with them or they can throw it away. We have to do it in the most safe and secure way that we possibly can do it. We do have masks available, but most people are wearing their mask in. We're not at least paying for hundreds and hundreds of masks throughout the day. And in the buildings that we are in, there's requirements. We're taking people's temperatures. These are just standard things depending on the facility we're using and the guidelines we're following. But to find large locations that you can do that, ample parking, meeting all the ADA requirements, it just a lot goes into that. And then after, it's the cost of some of these facilities that we're putting out and negotiating those prices. That's why I think that when we first said that we were looking at 4 super centers, we had only 3 and still possibly wavering between 3 or 4 others, because we had to negotiate the cost of us going in there and sign the contracts accordingly.
Terrific.
I'm sorry, just the setup alone of those 4 locations is unbelievable. And so you can imagine what we're going to experience strained on staff of setting that up on election day when we had 16 more. And of course, the schools are closed, and we're using 15 schools, and we were very lucky to have the St. Matthew's Community Center as the other location. But when it comes to schools, the schools are open, and therefore we're adding people into the schools, at least during this time. We had great concern with that.
Terrific. Thank you. Again, we invite everyone to submit your questions in the chat box. We're going to give you a break, Nore, for a bit. We have some more technical questions about how you all are processing the ballots, ensuring integrity and oversight. And so we're going to go kind of reverse, and I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Fran, I'll start with you. What kind of feedback are you hearing from voters, from activists, from grassroots groups about how the ballots will be counted, and sort of the integrity, or maybe concerns about integrity, of election night moving forward? There's this notion that it may take some time for us to get our election results. What else are you hearing throughout the state about election return concerns?
Well, of course, it varies from county to county, but it's interesting that what we hear is that people usually have a lot of confidence in their own county, in how their county is handling it. They get maybe sometimes suspicious about what's going on in other counties, but their own county, they usually have a fair amount of confidence in. As far as the League of Women Voters is concerned, obviously we always want to make sure that the votes are counted fairly, that there's no chance of any kind of voter fraud and all of that sort. We have absolutely no reports that would indicate that has been the case or is the case. And we have great confidence in our election officials and the difficult job that they're doing. And as far as funding is concerned, it is true that running elections fairly and openly and making this process accessible to all, there's a financial cost to that. But as far as the league is concerned, that is a financial cost that democracy demands. We need to support our county efforts to make sure that elections will be accessible to all of the voters and make sure they're fair.
Thank you, Fran. Representative Nemes, what are you hearing from your legislative colleagues and constituents? What concerns or maybe some misnomers that you're intercepting regarding how the ballots will be counted and when we could get election results?
There's concern about the election results taking too long. We might not know in a lot of races until Friday or Saturday. I think that's a legitimate concern, but I also understand that in some ways we've been very fortunate to have almost almost immediate returns. If it takes till Saturday to get it right on some cases, most races will know Tuesday night because they'll be, they're not that close. But the ones that are really close, it may take a few days. And I think if it takes that, oh well, we have to do it right. And and I'm saying that as a person who's in a race. So there's a lot of races around Kentucky, and if we have to wait till Saturday, then you got to wait. So I'm not too concerned about that. Of course, we want to know as soon as possible, but let's get it right. That's the most important thing. I think what Fran said was on point, and that is there are costs, but that's the cost that democracy demands. And so that's not, it's concerning because, we're in times where revenues are going down, and we have a lot of needs in Kentucky, and elections have been underfunded for decades in Kentucky. And so we need to not only, get to where we should have been in the first place, but now we have this extra cost that we need to bear. So those are the major concerns that I'm hearing. I don't think there's going to be much of a problem with integrity of the ballots. I trust our processes. I trust our Secretary of State has done a good job with the county clerks. And so I think this is a election result we can rely on. If there are things at the edges, there's always things at the edges. We had a race from Owensboro that was literally a tie. It was decided by one vote, and they recounted it was a tie. We had, I think, 6 races that were decided by 25 votes or fewer, something like that. So there are always situations where there's allegations made, and we've got processes for that. That's what our courts are for. But for the overwhelming majority of our elections, they're not going to be close enough to where any kind of shenanigans will make an impact. And I don't think there will be shenanigans in the first place in 95% of our elections. So I think we can rely on those. But what I'm hearing, to answer your question directly, is we're worried about the cost, both to the system. And again, this is a serious thing. The cost of a local election is now more than doubled because you have to run a campaign for much longer that is hitting on all cylinders rather than just reach a crescendo on election day. And that is going to have a long-lasting impact if we continue to have elections this long, which I don't think we should. We need to expand them, but not this long. But if we're going to have them this long, it's going to put a lot of more money in local politics, and that is not good.
And we've made a full circle here. And so, Nore, I'm going to tee up a couple of some technical questions. I'm going to do my best to consolidate. But essentially, your office, you all are charged with, counting the ballots. And so we've received a couple of questions, inquiring about the absentee ballots. You all are shooting out ballots as we speak. And the request has ended. The ballots continue to be mailed out and received. So can you walk us through that process as you all are able to count? What does that look like? What does that look like on election day? And how do you all anticipate being able to release the results? The process from start to end here.
Okay, let me address the results first. In Jefferson County on election night, we will have results. They will be unofficial. We will have results from all the 20 voting centers from that evening. And we will have results from the absentee ballots that have been received and up to that point and scanned. What we will not have is any that will be dated, or that's why we've been encouraging people to, once they get their ballot, to please mark their ballot and return it to us or put it in a drop box so that we can have more of the results from the absentee in ballots, because we do actually turn over our official results on the 10th. So we have 7 days to kind of complete them up. If we have anything that comes in from military ballots, provisional ballots, those will be done in that short period of time, but they shouldn't adjust the races a whole lot unless they're so close. But that is how that is done. And I think Jefferson County in the past has had those records of getting in by 9 o'clock, even from all those precincts. One of the things is in Jefferson County, we do not transmit anything. In there securely, all the information from those machines are posted and they are driven to the election center with sheriff's escort. so that we actually are feeding in what was in those machines that night, and every ballot from everyone is counted up to that point. But it still remains an official, and that's just a normal year. You asked me a little bit about the absentee ballots coming in. Of course, the labels are provided to us through the portal. When a ballot goes out, it is scanned. When it comes back, it is scanned back in. And then after the part where they actually compare the signatures bipartisan, they're done against the voter registration card. And it's done by a bipartisan team. Like I said, it's very intensive, labor intensive. When they come back in, we know that they're open. That is all done on camera, 24 hours a day. When we even had teams work in the primary, you could actually go on our website and you could see them being opened live by a bipartisan team. And the ballots are flipped over, and then they are scanned by a bipartisan team. If any are kicked out for whatever reason, we'll say somebody made a mistake on their ballot. We have a bipartisan team mark a new ballot for them because they've got it circled what they wanted. And then it is scanned back in by another bipartisan team. Hopefully everybody's vote as they wanted it to vote is counted in that manner. There are ballots that are rejected, and for a number of reasons. Most of them were for not having signatures. They've lightened up a little bit for this particular election, but I think that, and hopefully with the video that we produced here at the clerk's office, that Bobby had us produce on how to do a ballot, that's helped a lot of viewers where they can look at it on their phone, on their website, on the TV websites. We've heard a lot of great positive things on that. And the reason we did that is because in the primary, so many people, we found mistakes, and so many people had never done that before. So it kind of just educated at least Jefferson County and maybe some of the surrounding counties on how to actually fill out the ballot and securely put it in the mail so that a guarantee it can be read.
Let me, I have a couple of questions sent to me that have a little bit of a national flavor to them, but they are relevant locally as well. In fact, before I get to that, I do have one question that was submitted here also that's asking about what can be done to keep militias or other armed reactionaries, those are the words of the questioner, from intimidating voters on election day.
Well, every polling location does have security by the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. Of course, there are restrictions for keeping people back. I don't expect that, and I don't think the board expects that here in Jefferson County. I do know that yesterday we had a group of individuals who marched to vote, and they came down to the KFC Yum Center, and when they came in to vote, they were there for the business of voting, and they weren't there to cause trouble or anything else. And I don't see any militia teams and our groups coming in for that. Let's hope they don't choose Louisville. I think we're tired of a lot of things that have happened in the past, and it's usually from outside sources, not in our city, that have caused some of the problems that we've had. But I think that people are encouraging folks to vote, and so I don't see them detouring people.
I guess to follow up on that, do you have a policy or a plan in play, or just an answer to the question of there's been, on a national level, there's been a call to monitor polling places, namely by our president has made that call. Do you have an answer to that question if you've got people coming in there who are there strictly to monitor and look over you?
Jefferson County law prohibits anybody to come into an election area unless you're voting, or if it's a child being accompanied by their parent, but that prevents them from coming in. The reason to come in is to vote. Otherwise, they're not really allowed. At least that's what I can say to that.
Okay. Another question that has a little bit of a national bent to it. I think all of you have said you don't expect, and there's no real history of voter fraud. But in the eyes of some, there is a perception that the new voting mechanism in Kentucky and throughout the country can be subject and susceptible to fraud. If we have a close election, whether it's a presidential election or something here in Kentucky, if it's a close one, are you concerned about large groups of people having a perception that the outcome is not valid?
This is Jason Nemes. I'm concerned about that, but that's when, you know, leaders need to lead. They need to look at the evidence straight up. I know in the governor's race last year, Governor Beshear won by 5,000 votes, and there was an effort to delegitimize that victory. And the then governor Matt Bevin didn't stand down immediately, and he had all kinds of rumors and statements that he was going to challenge it. You know, I stepped up immediately, and a number of people joined me and said, no, it's the election's over. If you have, you know, 50 votes or 100 votes, let's have the conversation. Let's look closer and so forth. But with 5,000 votes, you know, it's time to stand down and stop delegitimizing the process. One of the things that we have a problem with in our country is delegitimizing our institutions. And so I think, you know, unless there's serious evidence of significant fraud, our leaders need to step up and lead. It's not easy sometimes, but you got to do it. So I think they will. I think when something that important is in the balance, I think the truth will come, and I think people will step up and put America over their personal or party interests. At least that's what I hope so, Democrats and Republicans and unaffiliated people. So am I concerned about it? Of course I'm concerned about it. But and there is some opportunity, but the opportunity is not different here than it's ever been. The way to steal an election, if you will, is, first of all, it's got to be mighty close. Then the way to do it is you have to buy people off, and that takes a lot of people. But the way we're voting this year is no different with respect to the opportunities for fraud as the way that we've done it before. We've had absentee ballots before, and so I'm not worried about the integrity of the ballot. It does concern me that some people in my party, to be sure, are delegitimizing the institution of the elections, and I'm going to be a voice that stands up against that. And I hope people from both sides of the aisle do the same. And you just respond with the truth and respond with fact, and pretty much say, if you got the goods, bring it. If you don't, shut it.
Here in Jefferson County, our equipment is new. It's just slightly over 2 years of age. But in the other 119 counties, they may have very different equipment than ours. One of the things I think that the Jefferson County Board of Election is taking great pride in the integrity of the elections we run here in Jefferson County, and all the concerns and the things that we look at in safety procedures, precautions. We had the Homeland Defense folks in looking at elections and giving us advice and looking over the process of how we do things last year. And I think that, you know, we've made some slight adjustments for the safety of that as we move forward, not only into this elections, but into the future when we get back to what would be considered normal here in Jefferson County. So far as the other elections, so far as the ballots and how those come in and things, we keep very close contact to that. One of the things, and no offense to Facebook, is a lot of the problems we had with the governor's race last year was based on accusations and things that came through Facebook. That is not the truth. People expand on that stuff, they share that stuff, and that's great. It's a very social, conversational thing to do. But that does not mean that that is fact. And it shouldn't be shared as fact to the whole, you know, state or to, you know, whatever within that city or to the media. It needs to be taken into perspective.
I very much agree with Representative Nemes' comments about leadership taking charge here and leading the way in terms of the integrity of our election process. Our elections in Kentucky, thanks to a lot of people from the Secretary of State onto all of the county clerks, have worked and have a system set up ready to do fair and elections that are certainly can be trusted. And we all need to speak out to that. The nonprofit organizations like the League and our political leaders and the media. We do need the media. the legitimate media, because it's no question that social media generates a lot of this. Rumors start on social media, and they just fly, and they become bigger than life. And so I think both the press and the TV and our political leaders really need to speak out as to the fact that people can trust the election results.
Thank you, Fran. And Nore, thank you. Representative Nemes, thank you very much. We're about out of time. And on behalf of everybody at the Louisville Forum and the entire Louisville community, we thank you for being with us today. And we appreciate your roles in Kentucky's election process. Our next meeting will be held on Wednesday, November 11th. As soon as we select a topic and secure a panel, we will send out an email to the Louisville Forum members and post the information on our website at louisvilleforum.org. And with that, we conclude our October program. Thank you, everyone, and be safe and stay healthy and get out the vote.